Thank you all very much. Boy, it's hard following Donald Trump, and it's hard following Jenny Korn. I have to tell you, I just got an invitation to give the commencement address at Clemson University. The future champions. Now, that creates a problem for me because I attended the finishing school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Wake Forest. Our football dorm is named after Arnold Palmer. And our mascot is a Southern Baptist preacher. So I actually addressed the Clemson team a couple of years ago, and I said, I was part of an organization that contributed to all of the great records at Clemson's Memorial Stadium. The most points scored by Clemson in the first quarter. Most points scored by Clemson at halftime. They scored 87 points that day. And you know, they have a mascot, the Tiger, who struck fear into the hearts of Nick Saban and those folks down in Tuscaloosa. But they still are scared. And the Tiger does push-ups to match the number of points Clemson has scored. It was 73-0 in the third quarter. And the Tiger disappeared. And the only thing we saw was an ambulance coming out of the Clemson tunnel. Tiger is splayed out in the end zone, little tiger hats off, his face is red as a Coke can, and they carted him off. And Coach Groh, who went on to weave his magic at the University of Virginia later, had a press conference, and one intrepid reporter said, "Coach, is there anything you can say about today's game?" He said, "Yeah, Wake Forest University killed that damn Tiger." And I'll say to your national commander, my wife didn't go to college. She went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It is an honor to be here. It is an honor to be with the Legion. Many generations of my family, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Louisiana, have been amongst your ranks since the end of the Great War. And it is also an honor for me to be here with my fellow Tar Heel, and that's little T because I mentioned my wife going to Chapel Hill. She is a Tar Heel with a big T. But to represent a state where this year, 1 in 9 North Carolinians will be a veteran. And I always say, having grown up at Fort Bragg, the most important piece of highway in the United States of America is in eastern North Carolina. It's North Carolina Highway 24. It connects the 70,000 troops at Fort Bragg to 40% of the United States Marine Corps at Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point. When America goes, 9 times out of 10, it will be paratroopers from Fort Bragg or Marines from eastern North Carolina who will be the tip of the spear. So it is absolutely wonderful that you are the national commander and representing all of us. I also want to do something that is not often done in Washington, and that is sing the praises of someone who is leaving, and that is Lou Celli. The American Legion has been blessed to have as its face and its voice someone who has served, someone who knows this town, but more importantly, someone who is passionate about those who have borne the battle. Lou is a towering figure in what we call our business. And an example is that the very first person I met when I was asked to do this job, having been the Undersecretary of Defense, was the representative of the Legion. He is a man of rare stamp, and it has been an honor for me to be by his side, and you all have been very lucky to have him. So I thank him very much on behalf of VA and the President. So before I talk a little bit about the changes at VA, which I think many in America have seen in the last 2 years, I want to talk about something that the Legion has known for well over 100 years, and that is the concept of why we fight. And I mentioned growing up at Fort Bragg. My father's great hero was Matthew Ridgway, the greatest of all airborne warriors. And Ridgway had seen the world from World War I, World War II, Korea, and as an advisor to President Kennedy and President Johnson on what not to do in Vietnam. And it was on the evening of D-Day when Ridgway began to assume legendary status. He had led the All-American Division to victory in North Africa and Sicily, and General Eisenhower and General Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery at the time, had asked him to plan the airborne assault on Hitler's Fortress Europe. The All-Americans, the Screaming Eagles, and the Red Devils of the British 1st Airborne. And he was so restless on June 5th that he actually fell out of his cot. And he reached for the Old Testament, and he looked for purpose, for meaning as to what was about to happen, because he knew that about 30% of his paratroopers would not survive the initial landing of the gliders. And he reached for the Old Testament, and he pulled down the book of Joshua, and he looked to God's promise to Joshua on the evening of the Battle of Jericho, and said, "I will not fail thee nor forsake thee." And Ridgway slept the sleep that night of the saved. But a few years later, he was called back to another crisis in Korea. Some of the people in this room know that. And he was asked to halt the reeling Eighth Army and turn it around to victory. And the first thing he did when he walked into the headquarters was to say, "What is your plan of attack?" The colonel, who was the ops officer, said, "General, we are retreating." Ridgway said, "Colonel, you are now relieved." And he looked back and he said, "We will find them, we will fight them, and we will fix this." And then he was asked later by the Stars and Stripes, why is America here? And Ridgway said it this way: America was here because this is about whether the power of Western civilization, as God has permitted it to flower in our own beloved country, shall defy and defeat communism, whether the rule of men who shoot their prisoners, enslave their citizens, and deride the dignity of man shall displace the rule of those to whom the individual and his individual rights are sacred. It has become and continues to be a fight for our own freedom, for our own survival. I think that sums up the spirit of the Legion, and it also sums up the spirit of those 41 million Americans who have put on the uniform since the first shots were fired on Lexington Green in April of 1775. And of those 41 million, over 1 million of our fellow citizens have paid the ultimate sacrifice. So that is why VA is here. It was 155 years ago last week that Abraham Lincoln created this institution that we all love, in the most spiritually powerful of addresses ever given by a president of the United States. He said, "It is time to bind up the nation's wounds and to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and orphan." And one of the last acts of his life before he went to the theater was to sign charters creating soldiers' homes in Togus, Maine, Dayton, Ohio, and Toma, Wisconsin. And those homes are still with us today. So what is the state of your VA? The state of your VA is good. We are not rocked by systemic scandal, by people waiting to see the doctors that they are entitled to see. We're in the middle of the most transformative period of reform since Omar Bradley stood in the spot that I now occupy. We have seen more veterans this last year than we have seen in our history. 60 million appointments within VA took place in 2019. That is 2 million more than took place in 2018. Our wait times are as good or better than any in the private sector. And what I predicted to Lou and to this leadership has happened. Veterans are voting with their feet. We have given them the opportunity with the Mission Act. When we can't provide a veteran with the service he or she needs in a timely manner, that veteran has the opportunity to go into the private sector. But veterans want to go where people understand the culture and speak the language. So only in Washington, D.C. will someone like me present a budget that is $243 billion strong, calling for 400,000 employees, and somebody still says we're trying to privatize an institution. Only in this town. But back to veterans voting with their feet. Our veteran satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. They sit at 90%. And that is a testament to the confidence that you have placed in this remarkable institution. And your brothers at the VFW in their most recent survey not only validated that, but they said that 90% of their members are urging those veterans who are not part of our system to join us. And that, too, is a testament. So let's talk about those organizational changes. The Mission Act. We already talked about giving veterans choice. But for me, the son of a highly decorated but gravely wounded combat soldier from Vietnam, the most important part of the Mission Act was to finally close one of those last loops left over from that fight in Southeast Asia. We have finally published the regulations that give financial and material support to the families of our Vietnam warriors who take care of those warriors at home. And it is long past time that we did that. And let me digress for a minute. That is why the Legion is so important. Those were dark times. Those are my earliest memories of the world beyond a military post. I've said many times that my father was gravely wounded in Cambodia. It took him a year to recover at Tripler before they let him come back to North Carolina, and then 3 years more before he went back to the 82nd. But one of the things that stuck in my mind as a youngster was here was a soldier as part of the All-American Division who wasn't even allowed to wear his uniform off post. That was not Cambridge, Massachusetts. That was not Berkeley, California. That was southeastern North Carolina, the heart of Richard Nixon country. What the Legion means is that we never return to those days when America turns it back on those men and women who provide us the very freedoms that we breathe and live every day. So I thank you for that. We have begun closing that other loop with the Blue Water Navy. Those benefits are out. We expect 70,000 veterans to apply and receive those benefits that are long overdue. We started processing them on New Year's Eve in the Philippines because their day was before ours, and we have ramped up that system, and I thank you very much for your support on that. The other thing that is out there that is more sublime, and that is suicide prevention. In a couple of weeks, I will be standing with the President to launch a national roadmap on suicide prevention with veterans at the center of that effort. It's called Prevents. Ladies and gentlemen, suicide amongst those who have carried the battle is not a new issue. The Army started taking statistics on this in 1892. And it has been steady since then, but no one has bothered to have a national conversation about the toll that battle takes on those who have come home. So every day, 20 warriors take their lives, the majority still from the Vietnam era. 60% of those who take their lives we don't see. So when the Prevents Task Force issues its report, it will open the aperture on how we get resources to groups like the Legion, to Catholic Charities, to states and localities so they can help us find those veterans we can't see and bring them home to VA. But if we just look at that last tragic act in a veteran's life, we will be doing a great injustice if we do not speak to mental health. And I'll give you a story about that. We've never had a national conversation about mental health. When I was little and it was the centennial at Fort Sill, I was about this tall. All of the officers in the schoolhouse were sitting in bleachers, and my mother and I were behind a rope. And all of a sudden, all of those officers snapped to attention in a manner that I never saw before and have never seen since. And a fellow about this tall walked past, and my mother tapped me on the shoulder. She said, "You watch him on television." And then I asked who it was. She said, "That's Audie Murphy." Years later, I spoke to Audie Murphy's wife, and she told me a story. He, being the most decorated of American soldiers for the rest of his life, after he returned from Europe, he kept a pistol under his pillow, and he woke up at night in deep sweat. We have never had the courage to speak about those things that you all have experienced. I think that this Prevents Task Force is the beginning of that long overdue conversation. But if we don't talk about mental health, if we don't talk about addiction, if we don't talk about those 38,000 veterans who are homeless, then we will be doing a disservice to you and to all who have worn the uniform. The other thing, electronic health. We are on track to finally end the days of people like my father carrying around an 800-page paper record. So that the minute that young veteran walks into a military entrance processing station, a record is built of that service. You don't have to guess. We'll know where that veteran was, know where that veteran fought. It will be interoperative so that when that veteran goes to his local hometown doctor, that doctor puts in information that we can use to create an entire picture of that veteran's health. We will no longer have to guess. I think this is one of the most, if not the most, important project that the federal government is working on right now. I expect it to be rolled out in Spokane and later in Seattle this year, and it will revolutionize the care that VA gives to those who have done so much for our country. So the last thing I will address with you is something that is on the minds of all Americans, and that is the coronavirus. I am on the President's task force. I think I will be speaking at the press conference that the Vice President holds later this afternoon. As you know, in all of our VA facilities now, we stop you before you go in. We are making sure that those who come to us are screened. We ask questions, we take temperatures. I will also announce that for our 134 assisted living centers, that we will be going into an emergency situation where we will limit visitors coming to our nursing facilities so that we can protect those who are in those facilities, most of whom are over the age of 80. We need to do that to make sure that those who use VA are protected, that they are cared for, And as with everything else the Armed Forces of the United States does, we will get over this, and we will make sure everything is done to protect those who have done so much for our country. Now, with everything else going on, clash in politics, coronavirus, we have not forgotten VA's legacy of medical innovation that has done so much for the country. VA was the first to create a pacemaker. VA was the first to perform a liver transplant. VA was first, and I say this as North Carolinians, we were the first ones to develop that nicotine patch. We have been in the lead. A few weeks ago, I just approved the coming online of America's first 5G hospital, our hospital in Palo Alto, California. We are out in front of the rest of the country, so that now, through 5G, through things like precision oncology, through telehealth, we are reaching veterans in ways that the private sector has never thought about. And that, too, is another reason why our veterans are coming to us in record numbers. I will conclude. I will end on a personal note. I was very happy helping General Mattis blow things up as the Undersecretary of Defense a few years ago when this call came. I want to tell you what I've told Lucelli, what I have told the Legion in convention. For me, as the son of a soldier, as I still serve in the reserves, there has been no greater professional experience or higher honor than to be part of the veterans family, to be part of a family that represents the very best of what this country stands for. So I will finish by going back to General Ridgway. In 1986, Ronald Reagan awarded General Ridgway the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And he said, "Heroes come when they are needed. Great Americans step forward when courage seems in short supply." That is the American Legion from that day right after World War I to today. It's about great American men and women stepping forward when courage seems in short supply. So on behalf of the President of the United States, on behalf of your Veterans Affairs Department, I thank you, God bless you, and thank you for everything you do, not only to preserve the freedom of this nation, but to be a light for the rest of the world. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Hang on right here just a second, if you don't mind. Secretary Wilkie, we are fortunate as Americans to have you as Secretary of the Veterans Administration, and want to say a special thank you for being here with us today.
We have our presentations. Chairman Turnbull is next.
Go ahead, finish what you're going to say. Are we going to do the document?
Yes, it's in the script, yes.
Well, before you leave, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to call on VA&R Chairman Ralph Bozzella for a couple of awards you might know something about or be interested in.
Terry Wilkie, it's good to see you again.
How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you, Commander, Mr. Chairman. Legionnaires, good morning. 2017, at this Washington conference, a White House intern spoke to our VA&R Commission. The topic was VA physician burnout. In order to stem that tide, she challenged the American Legion to offer a VA Doctor of the Year award. We accepted that challenge and went one step further and added to that a VA Healthcare Provider of the Year. And that is what takes place at this conference. And Mr. Secretary, we're so pleased that you are able to be with us to present this award.
Well, I have to interrupt. I apologize. You have the best in VA right here. We were in the office yesterday. Unfortunately, I have another duty. I have to go testify. So we'd love to use this as a reason not to testify. But thank you for everything that you've done to recognize outstanding, outstanding people. Mary and Megan represent the very best of us. Dr. Press in terms of psychiatry, and Mary in terms of getting VA to the homes of veterans who need that care. Thank you for your recognition. They are wonderful Americans and worthy of everything that you all have done for them. So thank you all very much.
Before the secretary runs, we're going to go ahead and present the awards. The Distinguished Physician of the Year is presented to Dr. Megan Press, General Psychologist of the Minneapolis VA Healthcare System. In recognition of your distinguished public service and commitment to the care of America's veterans for your professionalism and countless hours dedicated to ensuring veterans are treated with respect while receiving exceptional health care, presented Washington, D.C., March 10th, 2020. The Distinguished Healthcare Provider of the Year Award has been presented to Nurse Mary Ballard, RN Manager of the Oklahoma City VA Healthcare Center. In recognition of your distinguished public service and commitment to the care of America's veterans, for your professionalism and countless hours dedicated to ensuring veterans are treated with respect while receiving exceptional health care. Awarded today, March 10th, 2020. Thank you, and thank you all for bearing with us as we adjust on the fly. We're going to return to our regularly scheduled programming now.